I pre-prepared some muscles today, finally. And if we get really close here, this is a scapula. This is your humerus. This is your glenohumeral joint. If you are in the what's called the supraspinatus fossa, supraspinous fossa, sorry, which is supra means above. Superman flies above. Superior food is above other food. Supra means above. That's where the word comes from, supra. So there's a place above the spine of the scapula that goes underneath here. This part's hard, sorry, it's because, well, it's because of a lot of things. But what's hard about this is, come on little guy, there we go. There we go. There. This muscle actually is on top of the spine of the scapula, but runs under the acromion process. Anyway, it hooks outside here to this little, to the top of the humerus, out here like this. So, if you want to pretend it with your fingers, it's kind of like going from here to here. So what would happen if these fingers shortened? They came together. Thank you. What did you just do?
Abduct.
Abduct your glenohumeral joint. She's 100% true, and guess what the action is for the supraspinatus rotator cuff muscle?
The abductors. Delta.
Yeah, that's the only action. I mean, people say it helps stabilize the deltoid and stuff. I mean, the glenohumeral joint, it does. But that's the only action. You just figured it all out all on your own. So, in order to do a pull-up, to get the power to do a pull-up, do I need to abduct my arm?
Yes.
You do?
AD or AB?
What? You tell me. So,
yeah, you gotta abduct.
Adduct, adduct?
No, AB duct.
So when I do pull-ups, I push up? I know you raise your arm to grab the bar, and I realized,
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Because you do both.
Sure.
You don't just go up and stay there, unless you're doing presidential test.
Yeah.
Or girl.
But the power, does the power come from this muscle, or is that muscle helping you get in position? Can a muscle above your shoulder help pull your shoulder down?
No.
So the supraspinatus helps get your arm above your head. That's not a pull-up. That's a press-up. The pulling down comes from everything underneath. I understand why it's confusing, because you're right. You're right. I couldn't get my arm up there to grab the bar in the first place without the supraspinatus. But that's not what helps me do a pull-up. That just gets me in position to do a pull-up. Does that make sense? Yeah?
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. So, this cuppage, everybody, just led us into the 4 rotator cuff muscles. 4 rotator cuff muscles are the supraspinatus. There's another one underneath the spine of the scapula called the infraspinatus. And then there's the teres minor. The teres minor does not go with the latissimus dorsi. The teres minor goes with the infraspinatus. Anytime I say infraspinatus, you say teres minor. I will explain why in a minute, but it's for a very similar reason. Anytime I say teres minor, you say infraspinatus. And then there's subscapularis. Sub, like a submarine. Submarines go under the water. Subscapularis is underneath the scapula. It's actually in front of the scapula, but for our point of view, when you're working on a back, it's underneath the scapula. That's why it's called the subscapularis. So you've got a supraspinatus on top of the spine of the scapula, and infraspinatus underneath the spine of the scapula, a teres minor that we'll get to in a second, and a subscapularis underneath the scapula. So let's just practice saying those muscles first. We're going to practice saying those muscles first, which is supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. Yeah? Ms. Tisket, you want to help us? I'm not trying to pick on you, by the way, but it's just good practice. So, do you want to say them with me, or do you want to just try to say them?
Say with you.
Okay. Supra.
Supra.
Spinatus.
Spinatus.
Yes. Infra.
Infra.
spinatus.
Spinatus.
Teres minor.
Minor.
Scapularis.
Scapularis.
Beautiful. Thank you, ma'am. Nicely done. It was really good. Really good. Miss Rotana? Hi.
Hi.
You want to say it with me?
Can I try?
Yeah, you can try. What's your try?
Okay. Subscapular infraspinatus.
Yep. Infraspinatus. Yep.
Infraspinatus. Terry minor. Supraspinatus.
Supraspinatus. Nicely done. Thank you. That was really good. Yeah. Yep. And she kept infraspinatus with Teres minor. I don't care what order you guys say them, but keep those two guys together. Yeah, that was beautiful. Love it, love it, love it. Hold on. I just lost my train of thought. I was going to call on... Oh, Miss Juntapone. Hi.
Hi.
All right, let's say the four muscles.
Four muscle.
Supraspinatus.
Supraspinatus.
Infraspinatus.
Infraspinatus.
Teres minor.
Teres minor.
And subscapularis.
Subscapularis.
Beautiful. That was beautiful. It's beautiful. It's great. Thank you. Everybody notice, by the way, that like I touch stuff when I talk about muscles and I do pointing and things like that. That's for my memory. I'm going to try to teach you guys stuff, but you might want to start doing it. To me, it's always the supraspinatus, above the spine of the scapula, infraspinatus, teres minor, subscapularis. Because I literally could get to the subscapularis by doing that. You can literally reach underneath the scapula, and then you get to the subscapularis. It's just a good way to kind of you want to get the information in your head as many ways as possible. Yeah? So let's look at these on a body, and then we'll look at slides, and we'll do all that fun stuff. Yeah? So, the supraspinatus goes across the top here, and it really kind of goes across your shoulder like this. It's underneath your deltoid. All right, the deltoid's over the top of this kind of, and the traps are over the top of this, so you can't see it. But you can push into it. You can rub it on somebody. Some people call it telegraphing. We go through the trapezius to get to it. So it goes over here, and if it contracts, what it helps to do is helps to pull your shoulder out, which we call an abduction. Then we've got the infraspinatus. The infraspinatus is below the spine of the scapula. Whoop, my muscles got stuck. Hold on. Yeah. And you can rub this too. You probably have on people's backs. It's actually an important muscle to rub. Mr. McClure, please, talk to me.
Does the infraspinatus have a superior, middle, and inferior portion to it?
It does. It does. By the way, you're looking at the fibers and you're doing a great job. It does, but it doesn't matter.
How come?
Because that's a great question too. Because they're all still going to the same place and they're all still essentially coming from the same place. And the way this joint works, they're just pulling on it. They're not far enough apart to make it pull in different directions. What they're going to do is actually, they're pulling from back behind you. What they help you do is a lateral rotation. And they can't lift it up or down because it's inside a socket. So all they help you do is roll your shoulder out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I probably have a weak infraspinatus because my shoulders are always tucked forward.
You could, but you also could just have overly strong pectoralis major. That could be your problem too.
Okay.
Yeah. But that is possible. You're absolutely right. It really is. And I like that kind of thinking. That's the type of stuff we want to do. So, guys, this is the infraspinatus on here right now. I hope you can see that. I'm about to put the teres minor on here. Good. Who can see the difference? Thank you. That's the answer I wanted. Usually somebody's like, well, no. No, can't see the difference. If I were to use two different types of tape, like your book does, using two different colors, you can see the difference. But if I'm rubbing this, can I feel the difference here between the two? Now, there is a difference in the sense that really the teres minor is called the teres minor because it hooks to the lateral border down here, but it actually flows into the infraspinatus. And from a massage therapist point of view, I can't feel the difference. I'm not that good. I can come up here and hit the teres minor on purpose if I want by going up the lateral border if I want to, but I just care about rubbing this whole thing because what do they both do? They're both in the back. They both work together every single time, and they both do a lateral rotation of your shoulder. That's it. They just roll your shoulders out. Miss Smith, please.
So is that what you were going to say, just like the latissimus dorsi in the major, the rotation?
Yeah,
that's
it.
The similarity between those two?
Yeah, well, the similarity is actions.
Yeah,
right.
Action.
Yes, they both do the same action, and I would say these guys are even more similar because latissimus dorsi comes way down your back. It's only next to the teres major when you're up in your axillary region. These guys, you can't feel the difference. In fact, I'm not sure you could see the difference if you peeled the skin off. You'd have to get down to the actual insertion and things like that. So from our point of view, from working on people, if there's a problem with lateral rotation, you're going to work on both of these. There's no reason to separate them. You can't separate them. And so I put them together in my head every time. Mr. McClure, please.
So how do you go parallel and perpendicular with that muscle when you're massaged? Like, what's your body mechanics?
Usually.
The scapula is still such a confusing thing for me to try to massage.
Yeah. Well, first thing I do anytime I'm working on scapula is I find the spine of the scapula. And that's fairly easy to do. You should be able to feel it on yourself right now. When you reach back here and find a ledge, that's the spine of your scapula.
Got it.
Okay. So if you go above that ledge and push down in, you are going through the trapezius into the supraspinatus. If you go to that ledge, I don't know if I'm flexible enough, but if you go to that ledge and go underneath it, you are in the infraspinatus.
Okay.
And so I often work them when I'm doing strokes here, and I'll kind of find this and kind of work in here. I'll also work it when I'm on the side on somebody and kind of come in like this. And this is not a great answer, but I promise you it is the right answer in a way to give you. If you just play around with it in lab day, you'll be like, oh, it's all about finding the spine of the scapula and then digging around it.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not a really, yeah. And the other cool thing you can do, by the way, on every single muscle, to try to give you a slightly better answer, is
doing great.
I like to move the joints that the muscles affect. So if I put my hand on your infraspinatus and I start medially and laterally rotating you, I'm pulling your infraspinatus underneath my hand. And it actually gives you a more powerful massage. And it helps you find it because you'll feel the muscle moving. That's how I know I'm on the right muscle. So you can kind of do the same thing with supraspinatus. You can be here and you can lift up and lower down the arm a lot. And that helps kind of work on that muscle too. Any muscles, like that's true of. In fact, 25 years ago, I started doing it because I was having a hard time finding the muscles. And so I just would move the bone that they're supposed to be moving. And that's how you know if you're on the right muscle. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
No,
okay.
it makes perfect sense.
Good.
Sorry.
They call it, and by the way, when you push on a muscle and you move it around, they call it pin and stretching. You're pinning it and you're kind of pulling it away from you, and that's stretching it. And I'm a big believer in pin and stretching.
Cool.
I think it turbocharges your massage. Okay. Then the last one to show you. What?
I'll mess with it in lab today.
Yeah, please do. The last one is the subscapularis. It's found underneath the scapula, but underneath the scapula is actually the front of the scapula. We just don't think of it as the front because you'd have to go through a rib cage to get to it. So, but the front of the scapula is here, and it's very hard to show you this with tape, guys, because this skeleton has its scapula screwed down to its back. You do not. So let's see, though. We might be able to get in here. But the subscapularis is in here somewhere, and there we go. It goes to the front. It's this little piece of tape and it goes to the front. So it's coming from my scapula, but it goes to the front of my arm. And what happens if something's in front of my arm and pulls? What kind of rotation am I going to get then? Yes. Medial rotation. Because medial rotation is kind of front rotation, right? I'm rolling to the front as opposed to rolling to the back. So this is the reason they're called rotator cuff muscles. They help your glenohumeral joint rotate, right? And so the subscapularis, I know we don't think of it as in front, but it really, really is in front of the scapula. I know it's in our back, but it's in front of our scapula and hooks to the front of the arm. And so it's in front, so it does medial rotation. The infraspinatus and teres minor are in back. They do lateral rotation. The one that doesn't do rotation at all is the supraspinatus, which helps me to abduct. Yes, Ms. Cuppage.
Okay, so when because I've torn my rotator cuff really bad on my right and a little bit on my left.
Yep.
So when they say you've torn your rotator cuff, is there one that you tear, or do you tear all of them?
It's
or does it depend on what happens?
Yeah.
And how you do it?
It's very unusual to tear all of them. If you tear all of them, you probably lost your arm. So it's very rare to tear all of them. The problem with saying you tore your rotator cuff is that it's a generic term. So they mean you tore something in your shoulder. And here's what I mean by that. There's lots of stuff that people call the rotator cuff. These are the rotator cuff muscles. So I'm answering this question. There's just a lot to it. So if you can see on Mr. Skelly here, these are ligaments that help hold your arm in place. These aren't even the muscles. The muscles are over the top of these. You could have torn one of the ligaments that makes up your rotator cuff. There's also these little things called labia, which are lips around the glenoid fossa that help kind of make a socket for your shoulder to sit in. And you can tear that labia around there, and that's a torn rotator too. And you could tear the muscles themselves, the rotator cuff muscles, you could tear those, the actual muscle, or you could tear the tendon where it goes in there too. All those would be rotator tears. And so it's one of those things where like, you tore a rotator cuff. And they're like, and what they're doing that because they're like, you probably don't understand anatomy enough for us to explain. The point is your shoulder's messed up and we need to do something. Whatever. So they just tend to say stuff like that, right? And there's nothing, I'm not putting them down. There's nothing wrong with that. It's that they don't think the added detail is going to help you. But my point is you could have torn all sorts of stuff in there. They're talking about, they're just saying, you messed up your glenohumeral joint. That's what they're really saying.
It's because it can move in so many ways. It's very hard to stabilize and do really. I mean, I did it when I was a kid, and it's hard to. I mean, if I go to throw something too hard, it's like, it takes me to my knees sometimes.
Yes,
I mean, I did physical therapy and all that stuff, but it didn't.
It didn't heal right. It's possible there's still some stuff in there that just is, But I'm glad what you said, because that's actually the main point of these muscles is actually not for rotating, but to stabilize. And so when you have problems with them, you lose stabilization of that joint. And by the way, I hate that. By the way, fellow colleagues, students, you will have clients come to you and say, I have a torn rotator. I'm sure it's true, but again, is it the ligament? Is it the tendons? Is it a particular muscle? And even more importantly, is it a partial or a total tear? Total tears usually require surgery and are a very big deal. Everybody on the screen right now has had a partial tear of something and may not have even known it. We partially tear muscles all the time. I'm talking about micro tears, but we do it all the time. It's not that crazy a thing to do. And you probably even had partial tears of tendons and ligaments before that just healed themselves over time, or didn't.
Don't you have to tear them in order to make them bigger? Like if you're working out, that's how muscles get bigger, is that you're doing micro tears?
No, not really. I mean, I understand why you're saying that because there is some breakdown stuff that does occur with muscles. And we do think there's some damage. I'm not sure it's actually micro tears that are making them grow bigger. Yeah. There's some other things that activate. For one thing, your body is very intelligent, and when it notices that your muscle is being used to capacity and can't seem to do the work anymore, it tends to stimulate more muscle growth. Just like if you jump on your legs and your bones are under more stress, your body starts to try to put more calcium in them. So you've got some automatic growth principles going on that don't require tear down. They do require stress. You're right. Yeah. But do we do micro tears and do they repair? Yes. So 4 rotator cuff muscles, right? Supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor, and subscapularis. And the real thing that's important about these guys, by the way, you won't go through a week of working without hearing about these muscles. You won't go through 1 week of doing massage without hearing somebody say something about a rotator cuff muscle or a rotator cuff. Ever. These, you definitely want to know these. But the real thing they do is they help your shoulder socket stay together. And why does your shoulder socket need help staying together more than your hips? Because, yes, it's classified as a ball and socket, and you got a great ball on the end of the humerus. I mean, you can actually see it. It's a round ball there. You don't have a socket. You don't have a socket. Hold on, let me show you. Sorry. This is a scapula. That's your shoulder socket. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't count a teaspoon as a socket. It should be called a ball and teaspoon, a ball and slightly depressed area. That's not a socket. Sockets are things you can stick stuff in and they stay in there. That's why this has to have a subscapularis coming underneath it, an infraspinatus and teres minor coming over here, and a supraspinatus over the top to help hold that shoulder in. They actually give integrity to your shoulder joint. Yes. Thank you. I just saw somebody go, yeah. Let me show you a socket. Here's your hip joint. That's a socket. I could have a cup of, do a shot out of this thing. That's great. That's a good idea. Anyway, that's a socket. And your hip joint, your hips tend to not come out of joint for that reason because the ball really sits in there. It's pretty hard for them to pop out. But how often do you hear about people dislocating their shoulder? Super easy. There's not much holding it in there. And I guarantee you, once you dislocate it and they pop it back in, the first thing they do is send you to physical therapy to do what? They're going to have you do rotational exercises to build up your rotator cuff muscles, to give integrity to again. Miss Smith, please.
So on the homework, when it was the question you asked, like, why are the rotator cuff muscles important? Is that why?
Yeah.
Because it literally holds your arm in.
They give integrity to the glenohumeral joint. Yeah. And they don't hold your arm in, like your arm won't fall off your body without them, but you're right. They give strength and support to a poorly designed joint. And I don't really even know if it's poorly designed. Part of the problem is people use their shoulders for things they weren't intended for. The real way your body is supposed to work is that you've got these massive, powerful legs that are supposed to carry you to places. And what are they carrying to places? They are carrying my organs and my brain to places. When I see like food, my arms, like a little T-Rex, are supposed to come over there and pick up the food and, do stuff with it. But, and that's what they are. They're these manipulating things that my arms don't be doing me any good if my legs don't carry me there. I can't reach it, but my legs carry me over. Now I can reach it, and I can do my thing. That's really the concept. It's really kind of cool. Anyway, but people do all sorts of crazy stuff with their arms they're not supposed to. Like, bench pressing. I'm not saying you shouldn't bench press, but it's an intrinsically hard, your pectoralis major is so much stronger than your shoulders, and then you load up 300 pounds on that, and people wonder why they have shoulder problems. Or we try to throw a baseball at 95 miles an hour. Your arms weren't designed to throw a baseball at 95 miles an hour. Very impressive, though. Or we do the same motion over and over again because we have repetitive jobs. Human bodies do not like doing stuff for 8 hours straight, even sleeping. They like to get up and move every so often. I'm not saying you shouldn't sleep 8 hours. You should. That'd be great. You should sleep 10 hours if you want. But it's really good to get up in the middle at some point and move. Your bodies don't like doing stuff for more than about 4 hours. This is why people get carpal tunnel. It shouldn't be hard to type on a computer. It's not hard to type on a computer, but bodies don't like doing the same thing for 8 hours straight. So, Anyway, so these muscles, yes, give integrity to the shoulder joint, help to stabilize it, help to give added support, help to create a shoulder cuff where there is none. Yes. Mr. Kachekian.
I think I'm having some confusion on what I was missing in my response to the rotator cuff video.
I didn't grade it, by the way. Mr. Ibarra graded it. I'm not trying to put it on him. I just meant, like, I'm happy to talk to you about it, but he's grading your homework right now while I'm talking to you.
I see. Okay.
So he took a point off for something?
Yeah, I got only a couple of the points out of the 5. So
Did he tell you why?
He said, please list additional information regarding origins and insertions for each muscle.
Oh, did the homework ask for origins and insertions?
I believe it did, yeah.
Did you not do it?
I thought I put them on. But
Well, check. If they're in there, be like, hey, dude, I put them in there. But if they're not, that's why.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, by the way, origins and insertions for the rotator cuff muscles. Here's how I remember them. I remember that the origin, this is the thing that doesn't move. And in this case, it's the scapula. I know your scapulas move around, but the rotator cuff muscles are meant to move my arm. They're meant to move my glenohumeral joint. So this is the origin in this case. And again, it's not a big deal. I just care about the two little elves where they're standing, pulling each other. But above the spine of the scapula is the supraspinous fossa, and that's where the supraspinatus origin is. That's it. That's it. The supraspinatus is in the supraspinous fossa. I don't care if you said exactly like the book or not. That's perfect. Yeah. And by the way, the test at the end of the year, it's multiple choice. You know, if it had a question about this, it's not going to spell supraspinatus differently on you or something like that. It's going to be like, if it asks, I don't even know if it does, but if it asks about the origin of the supraspinatus, it's going to be like, is the origin of the supraspinatus the supraspinous fossa or the infraspinous fossa? That is a question I would ask. Because I'd be like, did you pay attention to my lectures? The supraspinatus has to be in the supraspinatus fossa. It's got to be. You know? The capital of Arizona has to be in the capital of Arizona. It has to be in Arizona. Okay. Anyway, so supraspinatus fossa holds the supraspinatus. This is actually considered a fossa too. The infraspinatus fossa is where you find the infraspinatus. And anytime I say infraspinatus, you say teres minor, and teres minor is down here. It's on the lateral border, but it's down here. And then subscapularis is where? Wait for it. Your subscapular fossa, which is underneath the scapula. The cooler part is where they insert. 3 of the 4 muscles essentially insert in the same place. 3 of the 4 muscles coming from the back insert into what's called the greater tubercle of the humerus. It's on the outside. The only one that doesn't do that is the subscapularis, which hooks into the lesser tubercle because the lesser tubercle is more in front. It's got to pull you this way. I will show you this on slides here in a second, but I'm just trying to tell you lots of different ways and things to kind of help you remember these things. From a massage therapist not taking a test, just working out in the real world, I care that you kind of remember the supraspinatus is on top here, and that's how it can lift me out here. I care that you remember that the infraspinatus and teres minor are underneath the spine of the scapula here and reach around, and that's how they pull my arm out. I care that you understand the subscapularis is underneath all this stuff. It's actually the back of your armpit here and pulls your arm forward. Let's see if this will help. This is a left arm. This is if I took my arm and tore it off my back with the scapula. Boom. So you guys don't see this. You normally see this. I know you don't see any of it, but you're normally working on a back like this. Okay? But this is how it would be on my body. Like this. This is the subscapularis. It is the back side of my armpit. This up top, that's the supraspinatus. And you can't see where it's going because it disappears underneath the acromion process and it goes down to the head of the humerus. You can't tell, but that's what it's doing. The infraspinatus and teres minor are going here too. And look, I know you see different little lines, but they're going to feel like the same thing to you, trust me. This is infraspinatus and teres minor. This is supraspinatus. This is subscapularis coming over. And what they all do is create this cuff here. All the tendons come together and help hold your shoulder in place. Kind of cool. Yeah? Yeah. And here's the big thing that's very interesting. And then we'll take a break. This joint is amazing. But the problem with amazing things like sports cars is they tend to need more tune-ups. Right? Any of you that own something that doesn't have any bells and whistles knows that those things tend to last longer. When you get the thing that has all the bells and whistles, those bells and whistles tend to break. And, you know, my elbow, for example, just bends like a hinge. Doesn't do anything fancy, but your shoulder does all this like crazy stuff. Medial lateral rotations, abductions, adductions, you know, flexions, extensions, horizontal adductions and abductions, all this stuff. And this is a very tiny joint, and it's got a lot of movement in it. It's got a lot of movement so you can have a lot of movement. Because remember, when you get over the food, I might want to pick it off the tree, take it over here, cook it over here, do stuff with it, put it in my pocket, put it in my mouth. I want to do all this stuff that I can't do with my legs. So it's got a lot of movement. Well, the problem with a lot of movement is that you've got a very tight joint in there and stuff can get gummed up in there. And one of the most common problems that happens is this supraspinatus running underneath the acromion process. Because if it gets irritated in here, you start to actually hit the acromion process you start to hit the acromion process with your humerus, basically, and you pinch the supraspinatus in there. So, this is a terrible humerus because it's very small, but if this is my humerus, this is my supraspinatus. It goes underneath the acromion process, and it hooks here on this thing. Well, if things get messed up in here, it can actually pinch itself. And it can get worn in here. You get clicking in your shoulder, pain in your shoulder. And this can happen with the other ones, but it's really common with the supraspinatus and the supraspinatus tendon and all sorts of stuff in there. And here's another problem that happens. What do you do when you feel pain? You tend to contract. Well, when this muscle gets pinched, sometimes you are like, oh, my shoulder hurts. Your brain sends a signal and contracts. Well, what does contracting do? It pulls this joint even tighter. And joints need to be not too tight, not too loose. If they're too tight, they rub on themselves. If they're too loose, they fall apart. And so, anyway, this thing can start to pinch itself and create problems. And then you get clicking, and every time you lift your shoulder, it rubs, and then it keeps getting irritated. And so a lot of times in massage, we'll try to just loosen up all these muscles to create a little bit of space in here so that it can start to heal again and doesn't rub on itself. We don't actually heal it, but we try to keep it from irritating itself over and over again. That's why this stuff is important. That's just a great example. And that is a great place to stay on the call, all that stuff. Feel free to work on your homework. In a minute, I'll be back in my office. I'll be able to hear you if you have questions. All that good stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.